This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. Hope you're good. Well, that was an international window that promised so much and delivered, well, some interesting scenarios, I guess. Plenty to learn from there, I reckon. We'll crack on with that very soon. Thanks again once for tuning in. Nice reaction to the preview episode. I know I had a few words about the new shirts. Seemed I missed the main talking point, didn't I? Anyway, that moment has passed. They're not going to change that anytime soon. Now, obviously, you've probably seen the games, Brazil and Belgium, either on the TV or in the ground. And say, we'll come to talking about those very soon. I'm going to hook up with Gary Lambert from Channel England Football on YouTube. But for those that maybe watched it on the telly, maybe haven't been to Wembley before for an England game, I want to try and describe what it's like before the teams kick off. And it's an experience that I'm beginning not to feel part of. And it's generally, I think, a Wembley thing or a big away ground theme. So let me tell you. Pre-match at Wembley for Brazil and Belgium, there is a DJ at the side of the pitch, opposite the dugouts. Now, she's great, and I've noticed that she has been moved from the stands, where she was a few games back, to the side of the pitch. I'm guessing to be a little bit more prominent. I don't know. No qualms with her. Amazing. She squeezed in the prodigies no good. But I've been to gigs at Wembley, and I may be exaggerating a little bit here, but the sound level at a gig wasn't far off this. You think, really? Then there is the light show. The floodlights dip and the ground becomes illuminated with various coloured lights, red lights, white lights, yellows, and then people get their camera lights on. I remember similar a year ago in Naples. They had it there, as I say, big ground. But this is for a friendly, Brazil and Belgium. Neither the music or the lights did anything to heighten the atmosphere for me, for a friendly. Yes, I could get it if we have a major important game. I don't know, if there was something on the line, maybe qualification for a tournament. If we'd ballsed up our qualification campaign and it came down to the last game of it, and we wanted to make the place a little bit more intimidating, then yeah, let's do that, something like that. I might be in the minority. Let me know. I'm fully aware the days of marching bands are long gone, and whatever else they used to do. And then there's the raising of the flag. Great. It's a little sort of samey. It seems the FA, England, they don't want to do any sort of tifos or surfer flags. You might remember a little while back they used to drop down some big old banners from the upper tier that looked good. And then they stopped Block 109 from doing that. So we consistently have the flag raised. And where I was for the Belgium game, yeah, it looks great, but it's just the same every time, isn't it? But they're also made of card, which you sort of, before the game, they're put over the seat in front of you, held on with an elastic band. And then you may see throughout the game paper aeroplanes chucked around and end up on the pitch. That's either people's match tickets or these bits of card that you hold up to sort of show the flag at the beginning of the game. And as I say, they just get turned into paper aeroplanes. And I'm going to sound like my dad here, but they're going to have someone's eye out soon, and someone's going to complain, because they can come at you at a fair speed from any direction when you're least expecting it. And I have to say, how many other European games do you see 8, 9, 10 paper aeroplanes at the side of the pitch? I know it's all very hypothetical, but then if someone's made a good one and it's caught a nice gust of air, they do end up on the pitch. And if one was to hit a player, becomes a distraction. If it hits a defender, puts him off, strikers through on goal, capitalising on the fact that a paper aeroplane has hit him. I guess I'm kind of comparing it to the beach ball incident a few years back. Who was that? Was that Liverpool? I think. Can't remember who else was involved in that. But if you don't know, a beach ball ended up on the pitch, and the ball was diverted after hitting it. And you kind of think, well, these paper aeroplanes, it just, perhaps I'm getting old, but it just really annoy me. And then obviously you're not allowed pyrotechnics for the obvious reasons, but the Brazilians can smuggle a yellow smoke bomb in, yet I'm told to lay my keys and wallet out as I walk through the turnstiles. And I begin to wonder if I'm their target audience, their target customer. But I'm there to watch the football, not a light show or go clubbing. I shouldn't have to think like that, should I? Give me a North Macedonia, a Kosovo, or a Montenegro away any day, where it genuinely is a little bit intimidating. And there's no Mexican one. I'm not going to start on the Mexican wave either. But that's just how I felt after those two games, and it's sort of frustrated me a little bit. Maybe it's a Wembley thing. Maybe it'll be slightly different when England go up to St James's Park at the end of May. We'll see. So just before the kick-off for the Brazil game, Terry Venables was remembered. He was also on the front of the matchday programme, which was just a nice touch. Now, before the game, Bukayo Saka, Harry Kane, Jordan Henderson and Cole Palmer were all unavailable. So the lineup was as follows. We had Pickford in goal, Walker, Chilwell, Rice, Stones, Maguire, Foden, Gallagher, Watkins, Bellingham and Gordon. So that was a debut for Anthony Gordon. Walker was to go off after about 20 minutes with an injury. He was replaced by Konsa, who he also made his debut. Then with 15 minutes left of the game, Manchester United's Kobe Mainoo came on for his debut. 3 debutants within the game. And I must admit, I thought, that seems quite a lot. I looked back, and it's actually the 4th time he's handed out 3 debuts in one game. There was actually one occasion where he handed 5 players their debuts back in 2017. It was the Wembley game against Germany. But then this just quickly take a look at the Belgium team, the Belgium starting lineup. There were 6 changes. Pickford retained his place in goal. Konsa started. Chilwell retained his place in the starting lineup, which was a little surprising, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in a moment. Rice earned his 50th cap and was captain for the evening, which was a nice touch. John Stones retained his place. Dunk came in. He came on as a substitute against Brazil. He came in and replaced Harry Maguire. Phil Foden kept his place. Jude Bellingham started against Belgium, as did Ivan Toney, replaced Ollie Watkins. Bowen came on, and Mainu had a start against Belgium. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the Three Lions podcast, Gary from Channel England Football over on YouTube. Gary, how are you doing?
Good, mate. Thank you very much for inviting me back on.
Always welcome, mate. Always welcome. Good to speak to you. Now, before we crack on talking about Brazil and Belgium, you've heard what gets on my goat. Anything that gets on your goat about Wembley or home games or England in general?
Well, you could probably name quite a few, couldn't you? Really? It's a very corporate day. Everything seems to be going Americanized, doesn't it? It seems a lot of Americanized traditions, music and I don't know. It's just, it's all a lot of show, and then when it kicks off, it all seems to go quite quiet, doesn't it? Usually at their own games, so.
Yeah.
Probably half and half scarves are one things that really annoy me. But I get why people buy them. But yeah, they're one of my bugbears.
Fair enough. Go on then. Right. So Brazil and Belgium were our opponents in this international window. What were your initial takes on them?
After Saturday night, against Brazil, I'll be honest with you, I was worried. I thought, are we overestimating ourselves again here? As we know, England fans, I always try and think, because we've done this, all of us, for all of our lives, think England are going to go and win the tournament. But I've always said this time feels different. But after that Brazil game, I was just so concerned, because when you look at that starting lineup, I would argue there was probably only 2 or 3 players. You could argue our best player is one of them, but only 2 or 3 players that it was pretty much a full squad, with the exception of those 2 or 3 players. And we were so poor. We were really poor. I know Kyle Walker went off early, but we just seemed very easy to play against. Any sort of pace against us seems to cause us a world of problems. We seemed toothless up front. And it just seemed, it was quite concerning, actually. I came away both disappointed and relatively worried, because 1-0, if we're being brutally honest, flattered us, really. Brazil really should have probably scored 2 or 3 that night. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, Brazil, I think it was the first half. Vinicius Junior had a run on goal, and standing behind the goal, you could see him sort of coming at us. And I swear he should have chipped it and taken more of the opportunity to put Brazil in the lead. Fortunately, it didn't come to anything. But as the game went on, I was kind of thinking, this is a bit of a 0-0. And if someone is going to nick it, fair play. If we'd have nicked it 1-0, we would have taken it and still thought, what, we've got problems. But Brazil nicked it. But I sort of came away, you do think, wow, how do we evaluate this now? I kind of felt that when Brazil had the ball, we were so slow to sort of track them down and close them down. But when we had the ball, Brazil were on us straight away. And it just felt 2 different sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brazil defended really well on the night, but what concerned me, it seemed quite simple. When I was watching the game, I thought anytime Brazil seemed very clear that our strengths were on our wide areas. So we like to play out wide with those two wide players, away from the striker. And every single time, whether it was Gordon, Foden, Rashford in the second half, whoever picked that ball up, they always had at least two Brazilians on them. And then all they were simply doing were counter-attacking us with pace. And it was, two very simple things in terms of how to defend against us and how to attack against us. And we were just... Yeah, and it resulted in us not being very effective going forward and very weak at the back. I mean, some players in particular, though, had terrible nights. Ben Chilwell played really poorly. Conor Gallagher played incredibly poorly. Anthony Gordon, though, was a highlight. Anthony Gordon did very, very well. Ollie Watkins, though, there's another player. He played incredibly poorly as well. And I think those three players in particular may have cost themselves a position on the plane. And I know a lot of us say these are only friendlies, don't read too much into it. But if Gareth Southgate isn't going to take from these friendlies any sort of idea who's going to be taken on the plane, then what's the bloody point in playing them? So for me, those three players now are really at risk because they were significantly, weaker in that team than anybody else. And they didn't seem to offer us anything going forward or at the back.
Yeah, I mean, you could say this was almost their last chance. It certainly was their last chance in an England shirt. Obviously, they've got the rest of the domestic season to prove that maybe they've got it in them to be on the plane. And first of all, there, Anthony Gordon, you said about. I have to be honest. I was sceptical about him making the step up to the senior team and being considered for the Euros so soon. I think if I was wearing a hat, I'd probably have to eat it now because he I don't know who the man of the match was for the England team. It may have been him. I don't know. But yeah, fantastic debut for him. Really good. And has clearly played himself into Gareth Southgate's thoughts, and that's a nice problem for him to be having. But yeah, when you do look at the other players that you mentioned there, Chilwell, Gallagher, Ollie Watkins as well, then you've got to really think about the alternatives as well, and kind of like, I don't know. Let's start with Chilwell. The alternatives, maybe Luke Shaw, who at the moment injured.
I think Chilwell's going to go, isn't he? And well, based on what you've said, Luke Shaw's injured, and then there's not a huge amount of options left, really.
Yeah. Well, especially after the game against Belgium, which I must admit, I was surprised that he was given a second chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we both said before the game, why not now, given the fact of how poorly he played, chuck Gomez in there. Let's see some other options at left back, and a bit like how. I know we'll come on to the other game later, but Branthwaite didn't get any minutes over both games. Palmer, he didn't want to look at him again. And you just feel like over both games, you feel like, why haven't some of these players been given that opportunity? I mean, going back to Anthony Gordon, I definitely think he's played himself into contention. And given again how Rashford came on and he was so poor. I mean, Marcus Rashford, you really do have to start to question what he's doing in these squads and how he's going to earn his place, because I think if Palmer would have been given minutes in either of these matches and done a pretty similar performance to Anthony Gordon, you've got to be looking here and you think, how on earth would Rashford stand any chance of going? You can't be leaving Gordon and Palmer behind when they're playing very well for the clubs and arguably then playing well for England, and Rashford's doing neither. So Conor Gallagher as well. I mean, before these sets of fixtures, I think a lot of fans would have been saying, play Conor Gallagher there instead of Henderson or Phillips. But he's really put a cat amongst the pigeons in a bad way for him. And in particular, in regards to another player who I'm sure we'll talk about when we discuss the next game. And another player, actually, who I think, and you may disagree with me here, Russell, but another player I think you may need to eat your hat on, because I'm sure at the start you were saying you weren't fully convinced on this central midfielder being playing for England in the tournament. But I think there's a shout now for this young lad to come in, but Conor Gallagher has done himself no favours whatsoever. And yeah, it's just maybe Chilwell goes because of the lack of replacements. Conor Gallagher, maybe similar. I think Anthony Gordon, though, it's so hard to decide whether Southgate's going to take that risk on him or not.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've since learned after the Brazil game, I think Cole Palmer did actually pull out of that one with some sort of injury, or they didn't want to risk him. But yes, by the same token, it kind of doesn't make sort of sense why he didn't have any part in the Belgium game. But the only other player I thought for Chilwell, who I think you're right, will fill a space in the squad, is Tarek Mitchell. I don't know. I, to be honest, I haven't really kept an eye on him. But the only reason I sort of say that, he's already won a couple of caps under Gareth Southgate. So he's already got that sort of established sort of place. Okay, yes, it's only 2 caps, but Gareth knows him. And Gallagher, the alternatives, yeah, you've mentioned Henderson, Phillips, Trent maybe has been sort of put in that position before. Let's talk the elephant in the room you mentioned there. Kobe Mainoo. Yes, you're right. I was sceptical about a player of his age coming into an England team so close to a tournament like this, how he would play. But yeah, the way he played, came on as a substitute against Brazil, wasn't phased, started against Belgium. It looked like he'd been there more than 15 minutes prior to that in an England shirt. So yes, he has to be considered as a Gallagher alternative.
The problem is now is that's it, isn't it? In terms of England games before he picks his squad. So he's got to make his mind up based on what he's seen. And you've got to argue, in terms of other alternatives in central midfield, Kobe Mainoo's got to go. He was absolutely phenomenal in that Belgium game. He was the player of the match, but he fully earned that. He was one of England's best player. Him, Rice, and Bellingham worked incredibly well together. I understand though completely. There's a world of difference between a friendly against Belgium and the opening game of a tournament, or a quarter-final or a semi-final against France, for example. So I completely get that, but you can only pick based on what we're observing from my perspective. And what we're observing is a player who's playing pretty well at club level and has come in and done pretty well at international level. And I think I'm a firm believer, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And when you look at players like Saka, Bellingham, England over the past few years haven't been that reluctant to bring in incredibly young players who have very quickly established themselves as starting players. I mean, Saka, he seems like he's been around for 10 years, but I think he's still in his early 20s, isn't he? So it's, I just feel like you've just got to pick on form. And at the minute, I think if you went and asked most England fans out there, I think they would now, after this set of fixtures, pick a midfield 3 of Rice, Mainoo, and Bellingham.
See, I'm not sure. I'm thinking of this opening game against Serbia, that we want to get an immediate win, and I'm just, if Henderson is fit, I can just see Southgate saying, right, we know what we need to do. Everyone knows their position. Everyone knows what we've done in the past, rather than having, I don't know how old Kobe Mainoo is, I have to be honest.
I think he's 18 or 19 or something.
Yeah. Rather than having someone so inexperienced at that level. Yes, okay, he's playing for Manchester United in the Premier League, and I think he's had a whatever tournament European tournament Manchester United were in. He's had that experience as well. But maybe he will play Henderson in that first game, and then maybe switch it around. Much like he who did we have in the Euros where someone missed out? Did Phillips not play? No,
he played it. He played against Croatia.
Yeah, there was another player missing who came in. I can't remember now. Well, as well, I mean, you could look back to 98 when Beckham was the player, and Hoddle didn't pick him for the opening game against Tunisia in Marseille. I don't know.
I've got a feeling. I'm with you here. I've no doubt, Russell, that on the opening game, Mainu will not start for England, and I don't think that has anything to do with the player. I think that all has to do with Gareth Southgate.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong, but he will go. I'm pretty certain with the tried and tested, and you can't blame him because we could all sit here and argue that it's worked for him in the past. But you can also understand now, this is where a lot of what I see about the criticism of Gareth Southgate, and as you know, I'm a big Gareth Southgate fan, but I do believe there is that reluctance to take risks. And I don't think in the group games it particularly matters anyway who we play in central midfield. I would expect England to win those 3 group games, regardless if it's Henderson, Mainu, or even Phillips. But at the minute, I think if I was going to pick England's best central midfielder alongside Rice and Bellingham at the minute, it would be Mainu. And so but I understand your point completely. But then when you look at his age, he's only a year or so younger than Bellingham, for example. I know he has less experience, but he's showing that he can do the business.
Yeah. Just mentioning Bellingham there, one thing I did notice with that Brazil game, he got quite frustrated quite easily.
Yeah.
I think he got yellow card as well, which...
It was a yellow card as well. It was quite a naughty challenge, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that's something that I'm a little concerned about. But I mean, I guess it's just an age thing that you do have to sort of still realise that it's still 19, whatever it is.
He's 20 years old. He's a kid, really, isn't he?
Yeah,
and I think I said to someone, it might have been you actually, on the night, I said he is one of those players who you think, could he do a Beckham? Could he do something incredibly stupid in the heat of the moment where he gets himself sent off?
I think any player could do that, but yes, I get your point.
Yeah, he's just got that edge about him, and I understand though that a lot of them people will say, well, that's what makes him a great player, and I completely agree. If you look at him over the past two games, including the Belgium game, he's the one. He's continuously trying to get the crowd up. He's the one trying to drag the team with the scruff of his neck. And you just think he's only 20 years old. And that is what I think sometimes England have missed. And arguably last night, he's the player who, again, was dragging England across the line. Obviously, he got the equalising goal. But that part of his game can't be lost. But it does mean, he's got that in him. And the last thing you want is him sliding in a quarter-final or semi-final and getting booked within the first 10 minutes. And he does have that edge, and it does worry me a little bit, but it's also something that I won't want to take away from him neither.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I know that you've on your channel that you've mentioned that there's probably 2 players that we don't want to lose throughout the tournament, either before or during, Bellingham being one, Kane being the other. And now this was an opportunity, I guess, that sort of put himself, or a situation that arose that Gareth had to deal with, that Kane didn't take part. So we had to realise what England is like without Harry Kane. And there is no sort of dropping deep as what Harry Kane does. There was no attempts on goal against Brazil. We really missed Harry Kane. Ollie Watkins couldn't fill that void, in my opinion, as you've also said. Ivan Toney in that Belgium game, well, he could have played himself into the
he was
squad.
all right. He was all right, and I think alongside the Kobe Mainoo situation, this is the biggest take we can take from these 2 sets of games, and I'm sort of not glad Kane was injured, but I'm sort of glad he was unavailable, because I think if he was available, Kane would have played both of these games, and I don't think would have known this either way. But for me, before these 2 fixtures, I was picking Ollie Watkins. I think Gareth Southgate should only take 2 strikers, just to be clear. And I was picking Ollie Watkins as that second striker. After these 2 fixtures, I'm holding my hands up and saying I was completely wrong. Ivan Toney was much better at adapting to the way we play as a team. He was much better at bringing his other teammates into the. It was a perfect target man, something that Ollie Watkins just isn't. They're both obviously very different players, and I just think Toney suits the way England plays much better than Ollie Watkins does. And I think like Kobe Mainoo and like Anthony Gordon, I think Ivan Toney arguably has earned his place on that plane now as a result of his performance. I'm not saying he was outstanding, but he was significantly better than Ollie Watkins, who I thought was incredibly poor on the Saturday night.
He's the sort of player I can see being brought on with, 15 to go or something like that. And I think if he is selected, come Bosnia and Iceland, the 2 friendlies, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a half in each to give himself another go. Injuries.
He's a big lad, isn't he?
He's
a big lad. And I think I've seen a lot of interviews with defenders and professional players, and they're saying, look, Ollie Watkins is great, he's got these attributes, but I would prefer to play against Ollie Watkins than Ivan Toney, just because he just seems like much more of a handful. And yeah, I just think it just suits what we need. Harry Kane, more than any other player, is our most vital player. He's not just about his goals. It's the way, it is that target man mentality. It's the way he holds the ball up. It's his passing, the way he brings other players into that. Ollie Watkins doesn't come close to that. It's not his style. Whereas Ivan Toney, because he is that target man, fits. Obviously, he's not Harry Kane, but he fits that mould much better than what Ollie Watkins does. And yeah, he was getting himself in much more interesting positions, few little cheeky flicks, wasn't there? And it seemed like we actually had a man up front against Belgium, whereas against Brazil, it was just, I swear, 80 minutes in, I didn't even realise Ollie Watkins was still on the pitch.
And Toney, well, he can put a penalty away, can't he?
Yes, yeah. I didn't realise, I knew he could take a penalty, but I didn't realise it was that. I think they said he scored 28 of 30 penalties.
Is that right?
Or something like that. So he's again, England and penalties. I mean, you almost should be given a spot on the plane, can't you, if you could take a penalty and you're English?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people I've seen use the word ice cool alongside the word Ivan Toney, and him taking that penalty, you can see why.
Confident. He's just really confident in his own ability. And I think that's the thing about this team. They were all very confident. I mean, Mainoo, go back to him. It's like he was just playing on the park. Bellingham, 20 years old, literally almost leading the team. There's so much confidence that flows through these young players now, and you've just got to let them go with it, haven't you?
Yeah. The Belgium game, despite being 2-1 down, we were passing the ball around, and we're playing effective football. Obviously just couldn't get that equaliser until the very last minute, but we're playing actually football that was easy on the eye, actually.
Yeah. We were good. I think I tweeted at half time, look, we're somehow 2-1 down, but we've been the better team. And one thing we haven't mentioned is obviously the mistakes in both games. It's defensive errors that are costing us. Lewis Dunk in the first game against Brazil, and obviously Dunk in the second game against Belgium, and then Pickford as well. I mean, I just briefly mentioning Pickford. I don't want, and he hasn't done, but it'd be really unfair for Pickford to get stick for that Belgium goal, because against Brazil, he literally did keep us in the game. Yeah. He made a couple of good saves, but those individual errors are a huge worry. And particularly against Belgium, I think without those individual errors, I don't think Brazil would have created much at all. And we were bizarrely the better team, but yeah, we went in at half time 2-1 down. But yeah, we were playing really, really well.
Yeah, it was a bit of a collector's item, really, that Pickford error. They don't happen often. And get them out the way now. Let's be honest.
Lesson learned. Don't do it again.
Yes, yeah, very, very much so. I mean, another player who looked like he was having fun, Jared Bowen. the Belgium game, right at the 25 seconds in, Bowen was racing down the wing, provides a cross for Tony, which eventually was sort of pulled back for a foul. But from then, Bowen just looked lively. He was keen to be involved. Unfortunately, his goal was ruled out by VAR, which was a shame. It would have been nice for him to get on the score sheet, but it wasn't to be. But I think he could have, another one, earned his spot on the plane if he continues to play like that for West Ham. I know West Ham they're still in Europe. They've got a game still to play. He could be another contender.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, he's a player who I had written off because before this set of fixtures, I think previously when he'd been called up to England, I was a little bit disappointed with him. But he came on against Brazil and he was just something that we'd been completely missing. I mean, I think there was a run he did down the flank, didn't he? I think you alluded to it. And some bloke behind me he's like Messi, and because he seemed to he went past like three players like they weren't there. And then in the Belgium game, he was really lively, really energetic, and it's good to see because I think in previous occasions when Bowen's coming for England, he hasn't played. He's not played terrible, but he's not played that well. But I think they were some of his best performances as an England shirt, right at the time when we needed them. And you just start to, and I go back again. I'm looking at Marcus Rashford, and you just think there's so much competition in these areas, and there's going to be good players left behind.
Yep.
And Jared Bowen and Anthony Gordon both having a good international break really does put the pressure on some of those established players, if you like.
This could be, the squad that, Rashford could be omitted from. Really, I think he was he part? He's been part of the squads for the last World Cups, the last Euros, and let's be honest, his form at Manchester United hasn't been the best. So he really is one of the ones up against it, one of the established ones under Gareth Southgate. But the one thing that still causes me concern is our defence. I mean, you've mentioned Dunk, who had a couple of errors. I mean, obviously he's not a starter, but Maguire
Maguire did it. Maguire had that poor mistake.
Had an error, that Brazil should have scored from. Yeah. Then we've got the injuries really too. Well, Kyle Walker went off. You'd like to think that he'll be all right. Luke Shaw, we've already touched on. Will he still be fit and ready to go? That whole John Stones went off as well. I know they've all got plenty of time to get fit as well, but that's where my concern is at the back. And you have to also consider that Walker and Stones, both being at Manchester City, they're still involved in Europe. So they've got plenty of games still to play. And it looks like the replacements that came in, just going back to the Belgian one.
Konza. I mean, Konza ended up playing quite a few minutes, didn't he, due to injuries over both games. And he was all right, but he wasn't, not setting anything alight. And obviously Gomez came in as well as another replacement. And again, he was all right, but I mean, you want either Maguire or Stones. At least one of them needs to be fit. And I think this goes back to the fact that I'm really disappointed as to why we didn't see Branthwaite. Why did we not see Branthwaite even for a half? Because we're so short. I mean, there's other players missing as well. There's no Mark Gahey, for example, who Southgate has liked to pick in previous squads, who possibly could come in. I mean, people would talk about Tomori, but he wouldn't be my choice. But for me, John Stones is the one. He's got to be fit. But then, it's a huge worry. It is a huge worry. You would expect right back to be sorted. You would expect either Walker or Trippier to. I mean, the fact that there's so many right backs out injured now is really unfortunate. So you'd expect that to sort itself out. I think we've got to look at ruling Luke Shaw out and start to think, right, who's playing left back now and who can come regular. And I think that's where I'd be looking at Gomez. But then at centre, it is just a huge problem. I think the thing is at defence, it just seems so leggy. There's no pace there at all, and that's all that was needed by Brazil and Belgium to cause us a huge amount of problems. And when you get players like Kyle Walker out, who obviously is the legs of that defence, there's a real gap there in quality.
Yeah. I mean, you Walker, and then the other side, Chilwell. As I said, Chilwell, I thought was lucky to be given a second chance against Belgium. I think he redeemed himself to a certain extent. And like we said at the beginning, I'm pretty sure that he'll be within the squad. But it is just, there are mistakes in that defence. Put it that way.
I think those mistakes tend to come from the fact, though, that England now we like having the ball, and as a result, we're playing much higher up the pitch than what we have done over previous generations. So, as soon as we lose the ball, it is very easy to get in behind us. Any sort of pace, anything like that, and. Yeah, I mean, I'd be looking at players like Kwanzaa at Liverpool if he carries on, playing at centre back. Branthwaite needs to, Branthwaite, I keep going back to him, but he's playing phenomenally well in a strong defence in the Premier League. I'm just astounded that he didn't get any minutes over these past two games.
Yeah, it's not the first time though that Gareth Southgate has called a player up and not used him in the games. Sometimes I think that, as frustrating as it is as supporters, you think, we brought this player in. We know what he's doing in the Premier League or wherever he's playing. But you think sometimes Gareth will bring him in just to see what they're like on and off the training pitch, what they're like around St George's Park. But yes, you're right. You think, well, this was the last opportunity, really, to play for England.
It's just in that area of the pitch where we're so short. So you just think we haven't got many games. It's your only opportunity to try players out in those areas of the pitch where we don't have much depth. And I just think it's an opportunity missed.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'll agree with that. I think you're right. So that kind of brings us on to Bosnia and Iceland in May and June when we will have a squad all fit, hopefully roaring and ready to go. It's just a squad that I know that you've been sort of trying to select on the channel. How hard has that been to select 23? Because it is 23 players is so much harder than 26, isn't it?
Oh, it feels like, because England now are so stacked with talent, it feels like you're only picking 5 players. It is that hard, and I just think this is what I think I've said it numerous times. 80% of the squad, all of us will have the same. I think all of us will have the same. Yeah, it picks itself. 80-90% of that squad. So you're probably looking at 4, maybe 5 players where I think you would almost ask every different fan and they would have a different selection. And that's where it's going to be. And nothing about these 2 fixtures has changed my mind. And I just think whatever Gareth Southgate goes with, I don't think he'll please anybody, because there's that much talent. There's just physically that much talent that good players, very good players, are going to be left behind. Because 23 men is 23 men. Whatever he picks, we're just going to have to get behind him, go with it. But you just hope, you just hope he's brave. You just hope he does take a couple of risks there, and doesn't play it too safe.
So the risks being Gordon,
Kobe Mainoo would be the one for me. You could argue he could just take Gallagher and Henderson. I think he needs to go. Dropping Rashford, I think, would be a risk. I think most people now would probably still say, Rashford's getting in everybody's squad now because of what he did 2 years ago, but he's not doing it, and he hasn't done it for a long time. But I think dropping Rashford would be a brave thing to do. And maybe taking a risk at left back or centre back as well, because that's the areas where we're light in. And again, I don't really have the answers for that, because there's that many players. The other player is potentially Jack Grealish. I mean, it does. he doesn't deserve to. At the minute, he wouldn't be going, would he?
No, you're right.
There's going to be some tough decisions there for Gareth Southgate to make, and you just hope he makes them.
Yeah. Well, 23 is a tough call to make. It's the starting 11, which is really the one that we'll all hope is the one that will get us off to a good start in the summer. So we'll leave that one. Everyone's got their own ideas on it, but we'll leave that one to Gareth and no doubt speak about that nearer the time. Obviously we've mentioned the channel. Go on, just tell us where we can find it.
Yeah, so Channel England Football, you'll find it on YouTube, just a channel dedicated to everything England. Everyone knows about the famous club channels, and this one I just thought, you know what, big England fan here, and I couldn't find an England channel, so I thought I'll set one up myself. So yeah, Channel England Football, you will find me on YouTube.
Magic, lovely. Gary, once again, thank you very much for your time. Let's catch up again. No doubt we will. Well, we will see each other in it's Newcastle, isn't it, for the Bosnia game next?
Yes, mate. I'll be there, and I can't wait for that. Really, can't wait for St James's Park. I think it'll be a great venue. But yeah, no, thank you very much for having me.
It'll be an interesting difference away from Wembley, won't it? Let's see how let's see what the light shows are like there.
Yeah, I think it'll be less show and just more about getting on with the game. Really,
I don't know how the Geordies take to paper aeroplanes. Gary, nice one. Thank you very much. And we'll catch up again soon.
Brilliant. Cheers, Russell. Thank you.
Thanks to Gary there. Don't forget, you can find him over on YouTube. Just search Channel England Football. You can join his regular Sunday evening live show, which is pretty good. You can join in with that. You'll also find him on the socials too, so go give him a follow. Now, whilst we were in action against Brazil and Belgium, the final 3 spots for the Euros were being decided. It was the playoff games, all one-legged. I'm glad that we weren't involved in this. So, this is how they ended. Playoff Group A. Poland initially beat Estonia 5-1 and Wales beat Finland 4-1. So Wales hosted Poland. And in a very tight game that ended 0-0 after extra time, went to the dreaded penalties, where Poland won 5-4 and they joined the Netherlands, Austria and France in Group D. That looks a tight one. Playoff Group B, Ukraine beat Bosnia 2-1 away and Iceland beat Israel 4-1 away, which meant Iceland travelled to Wrocław in Poland to play Ukraine. Now, in a tight game where Iceland took the lead, Ukraine came back to win 2-1. So it's they that now join Belgium, Slovakia and Romania in Group E. I think they'll fancy their chances of progressing there. And then the story of the playoffs happened in playoff Group C, where Georgia beat Luxembourg 2-0 and Greece beat Kazakhstan 5-0. So Georgia met the former Euro winners Greece in Tbilisi. Despite being down to 10 men, they took the Greeks to extra time and then penalties, which they won, and they made up Group F, which now comprised of Turkey, Portugal and Czechia, and of course Georgia. And it will be their first international tournament at this level. Bravo them. And also, what of our summer Euro opponents? How did they fare this international window? Well, Serbia, they played a match against the Football Union of Russia, which they lost 4-0 in Moscow. Of course, Russia banned from UEFA competitions. Serbia then went on to beat Cyprus 1-0 away from home. Denmark, well, they drew 0-0 at home to Switzerland and then beat the Faroe Islands 2-0 at home. And Slovenia, they drew 2-2 with Malta and then, interestingly, beat Portugal 2-0 at home. Portugal, of course, former Euro winners and some people's outsiders for the summer. So all in all, a bit of a mixed bag, really. Take it as you will. I think we'll bring it to a close there. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope you've enjoyed it. I will be back with you very soon talking more England football. Don't forget you can follow the show on social media. Just search 3 Lions Podcast. And you can also contribute to the Ko-fi account to help with the monthly expenses of the show. ko-fi.com/3 Lions Podcast. Any contribution is gratefully received. So till next time, take care of yourselves. Cheers.